Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Creative Belief. This is a podcast that's a curated collection of conversations with creatives who believe that creativity can change the world. My name's Alex. I get to be one of the hosts on the show, and I'm here with my buddy and business partner, Josh. Josh, how's it going today?
It's going well, man. A little gloomy outside, but excited to speak with our guest today and get to know him a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Indiana is like finally melting. Now it's that muddy, gross, rainy season. Can't stand it. But yeah, today we are super pumped to have a friend on the show, Gabe Lindman. Gabe is the owner of Illume, strategic branding consultancy serving early stage to growth stage companies. He's based here in the Indianapolis area where Josh and I are. Gabe, you and I connected last year as we were both kind of in the early stages of launching our companies. Got to have coffee, got to hang out, run into each other at a killer local coffee shop some. And I just got to learn like how talented you are, how incredible of a brand designer you are, and just how like kind and inquisitive of a human you are. And so we're super pumped to talk today. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, thanks, Alex. Those are very kind words. I believe you had already started your company when we met. Mine was just like an idea of something
for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
But yeah, I woke up this morning. You mentioned the weather. I woke up this morning kind of excited about the dreary rain just because of the melting of the snow.
Same.
Finally, I can put my trash into the little median between the road and not in my driveway.
Yeah, so you don't like back into it when you leave.
Huge win.
Yeah, man. No, we're coming off of a huge snow in Indy, and it has been a long time that it's been on the ground. So I am ready for it to go away.
Yeah, same. Well, Gabe, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. We like to kick off every episode just hearing about your backstory. Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, things that exposed you to creativity at an early age, what drew you into creating, anything like that.
Yeah. So I grew up in Indianapolis. I did not grow up in a super creative environment. It was, I had a friend who was really creative and his family was really creative. And I was always drawn to that. I took art classes growing up and everything. My mom had a little bit of a creative bend, but it wasn't necessarily something that was like thrust upon me. It was I grew up around a lot of business people. And so it was always like business, which is great and is helping me a lot in running my business. But so I had a little glimpses of inspiration here and there growing up. I was always, kind of the creative. I grew up with a bunch of brothers and I was always the kind of the creative one in that environment. So that was fun. But yeah, so that's kind of where I grew up, the environment I grew up in. But what drew me to creativity, I think originally was a lot of, self-expression. And this place where I could, just let my imagination run wild. That was a lot of fun for me. And really the, what kind of kept me into it was the variety. And even as a career, I've always been one for variety and just liking to explore possibilities. It's gotten me in trouble a lot, but I will not apologize for it because it's
absolutely.
A part of like who I am and what I like. And so that's what kind of keeps me in it.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I resonate so much with that piece of like self-expression. Like I remember the very first time Josh and I were actually talking about this before we got on the show. We were talking about Photoshop versus Illustrator, and that people who love Photoshop, I have questions about their humanity. But we were just talking about that. And I remember the first time I got my hands on Photoshop and when I could like digitally manipulate photos of myself, of our family, and create this like new expression of like myself, how I appeared, all of that. And like, I was hooked from that moment on of, man, there's so much potential. So I resonate with that component of like self-expression a ton.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember getting Photoshop for the first time on like a little disc when I was like, I think it was sometime in elementary school, and just
Yeah.
playing around with that
Yeah,
forever.
for sure. That's
I used
awesome.
to have my cousin would illegally download Photoshop for me, so I didn't have to pay for it.
There
I was
you
going to
go.
say, like, are we going to talk about that? Because I know that I definitely bummed it off some friends who were in college so I could get the
Yep.
full Adobe
Well,
suite for free. Adobe, thank you for your kind generosity to all of us creatives. That's awesome. So, Gabe, talk to us a little bit about then, like, the career journey of getting into like creativity, design, that space is kind of a full-time career. What led you there? And then ultimately, like, what led you to starting your own thing?
Yeah. So I think going to starting my own thing, going back to even like growing up in my family, like we've always been very much entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
And and mentioned I grew up in a very like business family, but it was like a good thing because they're always like my parents were always dabbling in something.
Yeah.
They always had these little, even though like my dad worked for a company, but he always had other little side companies, and they're always, so that mindset was kind of baked into me.
Yeah.
So I would think that, even going into college, I always had the dream of one day starting my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up studying marketing in school. Again, more of the business focus, so like pushing me into
Yeah.
business school, which was great. But then I felt like I was a little like I was more creative than a lot of my business colleagues, but I was a lot more structured than a lot of my creative friends
mm,
and
Yep.
everything. So I kind of felt like I fell in this like weird in between.
Yeah.
And so yeah, went to business school. Learned a lot there, which was great. Like it was a great experience. But then in college, I really kind of stumbled into graphic design. I had a little introduction in high school. I took one class. Um, but I just started making posters for the campus events
Nice.
organization, and so doing that, I just kind of fell in love with it. I really enjoyed the design, the creative aspect, and it was always tied into marketing because it was for marketing
Yeah.
purposes, right? But really that that creative piece, and then even like the writing, I've always been big into words and loving. I've just always loved writing.
Yeah.
And so pulling that in with the design piece and creating something and making people feel something was just it was a big draw to me. And so right out of school, I ended up going to an agency because I was always like, I didn't really want to work for one company. Again, going back to the variety,
Yep. Yep.
I was like,
yeah.
I want to
Yep.
work for an agency and like kind of like bounce between companies. Like that
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of
Yeah.
fun. It's exhausting sometimes, but it is
For
also a
sure.
lot of fun. So I went the agency route, ended up getting in to more of their creative departments and going that route. And then, went to that agency. Then I went to another agency. Then I went to another agency. And then I was like, you know what? I'm ready. Let's start my
Yeah.
own agency. I've got enough
For
agency
sure.
experience.
Yes, for sure. And I feel like that's the life of like a lot of serial agency entrepreneurs, right? Like we just kind of bounce around and find different endeavors. And I think you and I are similar. And I think Josh too, in that regard of like, sometimes I just get tired of being in the place that I am and I need to change things up or I need to do new client work or different things. There is that like itch that needs scratched
Mm-hmm.
of changing things up. I want to go like in further on. You talked about being in that like weird in between of like a structure and like an ultra creative. Cause dude, I'm the same, but I think that's like a big tension point with a lot of creatives is like, oh, I need all the free space in the world to run, to create. I need time to just like lay down on the hillside and let the sun soak over me. And like, I think that's cool. But I also think creatives without boundaries really struggle. So talk about
Mm-hmm.
that, like that tension, and kind of how you've like worked through a lot of that and how that's helped you as a creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely helped me, especially in the space that I'm in. Because like I think there is like there's definitely a place for laying on that hill, soaking in the sun, letting your thoughts just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like reminisce over you. There's definitely a place for that, and I think that's important to make space for that. Um, but also I think, you know, real creativity has boundaries. You know, you
Yeah.
even think to like an artist, like there's a boundary of a canvas. You got to make it within this canvas. You know, going into like the industry, you know, you're working with a client. There's boundaries, and those boundaries are very good. And like if you do a really good, you know, brand strategy, that basically creates the boundaries.
Yeah.
That helps influence the creative output. And I think all that's really important, because otherwise you could just go everywhere and
Right.
then create something that doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
So to really use and like harness the power of creativity and to something that actually means something and has substance, I really think those boundaries are super important.
Yeah. Totally
Yeah,
agree.
no, that's really good. And I think that as creatives, I mean, we talk about like going and laying on the hill and soaking up the sun, like that inspires and works for some people, and some other creatives like it doesn't. And I think that's what's important too, is like understanding those things that fill you and inspire you, regardless of how your brain kind of functions, regardless if you lean, you know, maybe more business thinking minded than what you might think creatives do. There's still these moments that I think we all desire to fill us or to inspire us, that we that change maybe as we get older as well. And I think it's important to find the time to make excuse me, to find the time for those things as well. So it's really good. Really good stuff there. Um, so that kind of like, I feel like gets us into a little bit of thinking about like the creative process a little bit, and how there's that area of like inspiration, that area of things that need to fill us, and we need to kind of like think through what's for you. How do you go about your creative process? What's your process look like when you whether from start to finish or whatever? But what do you like to do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to soaking up the sun, I definitely do like my time to soak up the sun.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
For
you know,
sure.
and
And I
Especially
just want to
I
say
think
too, like if you guys want to go lay on a hill somewhere and soak up the sun, like I'm all in for that, just to be really clear. I don't want to like ridicule people who do that.
yeah, we just lost all listeners that soak up the sun.
yeah.
I'm so sorry. That was like a really
I forget
aggressive
who it was, but
analogy.
it was like I listened to some podcasts, and it was some famous author, and he was talking about the importance of like slow productivity.
Yeah.
I forget who this author was, but he would like go outside into his backyard and lay on the table for like 8 hours, or it might have been
Whoa.
a scientist, something like that.
Hey. Yeah.
And but doing that freed up, gave the space in his mind so that he came up with like extraordinary ideas and
Yeah.
helped his scientific process through. So I do think
Hey.
there's some importance to that.
For
Yeah,
sure.
Um,
absolutely.
you know, and
Absolutely.
I kind of like doing that, especially at the beginning of each project. I like
Mm,
to kind of go on a walk, you know, get clear my head, get space,
yeah.
so I can start to think about it, right? And then always, you know, I have to gather inspiration from places. I've got a lot of like design books, as you can see behind me, some of them.
Yeah.
A lot of books that I like looking through. I used to look online a lot. I still do look online, but sometimes I just like to go through books,
Yeah.
and
Same.
just see it through like history, so that I get outside of our current time and what is trendy and
Yeah.
what is in vogue right now,
Yeah. That's good.
to help grab some other inspiration. And then yeah, I have to like set on some good music like when I get to work and
Mm.
everything, and have an idea that I'm, you know, excited about. I sketch out a lot. And so I listened to I don't know, I was going over these questions yesterday with my wife, and I was like, does this make sense? Like I listen to this like music, it's like jazz, hip hop, lo-fi,
Yeah.
funk, kind of all blended
Yes.
together.
Yes. Makes
I
a
don't
ton
know.
of
It's very
sense.
vibey.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Definitely.
ask, like, do you have like a go-to artist or Spotify playlist? But I mean, I think that's a solid
Yeah,
combo.
yeah. So it's very vibey, and it really gets me in the zone. I mean, you see like my office around me. You know how I set
Yep.
that up. I had to like, you know, this is at my home, and I'm like, man, I have to work in an environment where I can focus and, get in the zone. And so that
Yeah,
was
for
really
sure, dude.
important to me. But yeah, so that's kind of how I get started and work through some of my ideas.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. I do love the wall planters. Like, we'll have to get the information about those after we're done here because
Etsy. I've
Etsy,
got
I
two
love
more that
Etsy,
I'm not
man.
using. I bought a pack of 4, and I'm like, man, I don't know what to do with these other 2. So you might,
Let's go.
I
We
might just
can
give them
work out a, I say we can
to
work out a deal.
you.
You know,
Yeah.
I can Venmo you later. No, dude, I agree. Like, environment is critical. All of that stuff, music, like when I want to do deep creative work, all of that stuff matters. And I think I love talking about slow productivity. That's become kind of like a theme
Mm-hmm.
as we've talked to different creatives, is like the getting out of that like rush culture, out of that hustle culture that so many places are pushing, and agencies are like, we gotta crank out this work. We gotta have all this, productivity, and we gotta create so many things. And a lot of people are like, it's just not working. Like, we are creating terrible things when we do that. And we want to offer the best that we have to our partners, to our clients, to our communities. And so, man, I love that idea of slow productivity. I might go lay out on my picnic table outside today for 8 hours. Like, that
There we
sounds
go.
great.
I've got a few books I can shoot your way about.
Yeah,
But
I
absolutely.
will say I've gone out late on the kids trampoline for like an hour or two before and just look straight up in the sky, look at the clouds, watch the planes fly over. It is a very freeing exercise that I do recommend.
For sure. Someone's
yeah.
going to listen to this and be like, these are a bunch of like new age weirdo designer dudes.
I wish.
Uh,
I
And I'm
wish.
okay with that. I'm okay with
Yeah.
that.
I think there's something to be said for like slowing down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like
absolutely.
to your point, like even outside of the creative fields, there is like a point
Hmm.
where you can grow too fast, where you can move too
Yep.
fast, and where it's just destructive and doesn't actually add value, and you're just kind of moving for the sake of moving. I think
Yes.
of the I don't know, common like people will talk about this like in office work, like when you're working in the office with your coworkers and stuff, and that whole idea of like
Mhm.
looking busy. And so it's like you're moving
Yep.
Mm.
fast, you're not going anywhere, but you're just like running around in
No.
circles,
Yeah.
just to look like you're moving. And like
Right.
that's just it's exhausting, and it's like to actually create things of value and to create impact, you do need that space, and you
Yeah.
do need this longevity mindset and kind of pace it out. There are points where you have to like get down and sprint, so I'm not
Yep.
not advocating like never do that, because there are points where
Yeah.
you really need to do that, but there are also points where you need to take a step back and allow for
Yeah.
that space.
And I think like all of us, right? Like mid 30s ish. Josh is, way up there. He's ancient. But all of
37.
us,
Come on.
okay,
Late
above mid
30s.
30. All of us in that range, like, we're all stepping into this. This is like the career a lot of us want to have for the rest of our careers. Right. And so I think a lot of like young startup entrepreneurs that I've talked to get into this and they sprint from the beginning, and 4 or 5 years in, like, they're completely burnt out. They don't want to do this anymore.
Mhm.
And they end up kind of giving up on their dream because they've run so hard, so fast the entire time and haven't had that picture of the end in mind. And I think that's also true for the creative things that we create, right? When we just like push them out the door and we don't think about the long-term impact, the longevity of the brands we create, the solutions that we creatively come up with, we create things that just don't last, that don't stand the test of time, like the art that we have seen from decades past. When you look back at like the Renaissance, these beautiful things that have stood the test of time creatively. And there was a very slow approach to all of that. So I think that's so good. Dude, let's talk about creative myths, because I think that we're kind of in that space, right? And talking about longevity and running slow. What are some other creative myths that you are like, these are horrible things, they need to be busted, we need to not talk like this anymore as creatives?
Yeah. I think one thing, I don't know if it's like an actual like said myth, but it's definitely an implied myth. Is that this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is that, there are some people that are creative, there are some people that are not creative, right?
Mm,
And I kind of reject that binary notion. I think there's a
Let's
spectrum.
go.
There might be people that are more creative and some people that are less. There might be something
Yeah.
like that, but like everyone is creative. I mean,
Yeah.
literally everyone, even business people. Like you have to be. Like
Yeah.
like when you're running a business, like you got to think about ways to make money. Sometimes if you're struggling to make money, you got to be really creative on how you're going to make money.
Mhm.
And like that's like, not typically seen as like a creative act, but it's like, oh no, they're super creative. And and everyone, kind of has, even from childhood, a story of something that they did, whether
Mm.
it was music, whether it was art, whether it was like acting or comedy, I don't know. But everyone has something that they,
yeah.
really enjoyed and that they still kind of carry with them. I think some people lose a little bit of touch with their creative selves as they grow
Mhm.
older and might become a little bit more jaded towards it. But I think that's one big myth, like that's kind of out there, and there could just be a lot of like pretentiousness amongst
Yeah.
creatives,
Yes.
and there's this divide, and like that, and on the flip side, that creatives are just these wild, like anti, normal people that are just going out doing their thing, and we don't
Yeah.
understand
Laying
them.
Yeah.
on a
We
hill.
need to understand them. And then on the other side, it's like that. Oh, you're not creative. We're creative. Look at us.
Yeah, it's almost like that word just needs redefined. Like creativity, it should be redefined in the sense because it's become uh more of what your job title is, or what I'm saying. Like I'm a graphic designer, so obviously I'm creative, but you're an accountant, so you're not. And it's like, oh, that's not true, and so I think that there's just this shift that I don't know. I see it happening in a lot of conversations I've had with people around that too. It's like, and I think as creatives, like we play a role in helping people see that
Mm-hmm.
maybe all their lives have been told they're not creative, or they've just never thought of themselves as creative because they, don't enjoy art, or they never enjoyed coloring, or and it's like there's millions of mediums across this world, right? Like
Yeah.
and so I think that the redefinition of the word in us as creatives, helping people see that, but and kind of unlock that in themselves, really is important, and really allows people to see, oh yeah, I may not be able to put together a logo in Illustrator, but I'm I can really put together an awesome business strategy to help,
Mm-hmm.
with sales or with things like that. And it's like I could never do that. So like that's incredible. And I think that
Yeah.
people understanding that that's a form of creativity. That's
Yeah.
just it can be really important.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like, one, I want to clarify, we did not pay Gabe to say all of that, because that's like the premise of this podcast, is that everyone was made to create. We want to unlock that creative belief in every single person. And it's been fascinating having conversations as we invite people onto the show, because there are people that I've reached out to and they're like, dude, I'm not creative. Like, I don't have anything to offer. And creativity in its simplest form is like solving problems. It's coming up with solutions to problems in whatever field that you may be in. And so I think like that's what we want to do with this podcast. And in the conversations we get to have is show people that like we were all made to create something, and that there is creativity that is just naturally instilled in all of us.
I also want to say Alex didn't pay me to say that either. So
Well, yeah, I don't ever pay you. I just take advantage of you. So,
yeah, I know.
yeah, I could go on that soapbox with you, bust that myth for hours on end. That is a thing that I agree that we should be rejecting in the world of creativity for sure. So, dude, let's talk about advice, right? You are a couple months into starting this new endeavor. Also, I just want to say how much I appreciate you having like your branding in this killer sign behind
Oh,
you, this
thank
like
you.
neon situation. I value that stuff too. Like the first thing I did when I started my business was like, we're ordering stickers, we're ordering swag. We don't have a single client yet, but we are getting this thing branded well. So I love that. But let's talk
Well, I
about like
appreciate it. My wife
advice.
rolled her eyes a little bit when I got it.
Same.
I do things. I'm a
Same.
little extra. I'll come out and admit
Hey, same.
Well, you and Alex are pretty similar.
it.
We really are, man. That's why we connected so well. But let's talk about like advice, either that you were given or advice that you would give to someone as they're taking that leap, thinking about jumping out and kind of starting their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, the advice that I keep hearing, and this is probably what I'd give. I feel like I'm not far enough along in the journey enough to actually give my own advice. So I'm gonna steal other people's advice because I think it's really good. And the idea of just sticking to something and like even going like back to our theme of like slow productivity. Like success doesn't happen overnight. It's not fast. It's not something you can just like turn on Netflix and and then whoa, we're a successful business. It's something that you just stick to, and you got to kind of grind it out for a little bit. And I know that word grind even has negative connotations with like hustle and stuff, but like it's a slow grind though. It's like just commit to something, you keep doing it, and eventually I think that eventually like you kind of look up from your work and you're like, oh, we've actually made it. Oh, we've been doing this for 10 years. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where did time come from? Go and everything. I saw a quote the other day. I think it was from Alex Hormozy. He kind of talks about this theme a lot.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate it. But he's like, starting a business is like running a marathon when you're out of shape and you don't know where the finish line is, or if there's a finish line. you just start. Like
Josh and I can intimately speak to that feeling.
Yeah, and so I think that's it, and I think the question too was talking about like even creativity, like creative advice, and like that's kind of the same thing. Is like as I was thinking about that, that was more business, but this one, like even creative, like you just got to start producing stuff. Just do it, and you learn, and every failure is an opportunity to learn. There isn't really failure as we've defined it doesn't really exist. It's an opportunity to pivot, to learn, to adjust, and eventually you do it long enough, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's so good.
Absolutely,
man.
That's really good.
Sweet. Well, let's as we kind of head toward wrapping up, let's talk a little bit about like, where do you see creativity going in the next 5 years, right? There's so much on the horizon in our specific field of brand design, being like developing brands, all that. Where do you see that world going in the next 5 years?
Oh man. I was wrestling with this question the other day. I mean, there's a lot of conversation in our space, especially around like AI and like kind of how quickly like, and how disruptive it has been for the industry and everything, which it has, and I'm not going to negate that. But I think in the future, like really, we talk about like the true definition of creativity is solving problems. And I would add to that, really like the definition of creativity is being able to like use divergent thinking to solve problems. So you're able to step outside of, the problem you're solving and connect dots that people would not have otherwise connected, and that's really good. Where the value is. And so I think that skill will always be valuable, even with AI and the ability to, use AI, to maybe speed up some processes or not use it. I think that's, the people who are able to not get caught up in the rush of it and like in the vogueness of it, and able to step outside of it and start to, really use it intentionally, or not use it intentionally, for reasons, and are very thoughtful about those reasons. I think that's, I don't know if that answered that question fully, but I think that's kind of the future of, what it looks like to be a successful creative.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's good,
No,
man.
that's really good. I love there's still a lot of thoughtfulness that needs to happen that I wonder if AI will ever be able to think on their own, you know? So it's like, I think there's always that, we can kind of work together with the AI stuff. Cause it does help with efficiency and different things like that for sure. But no, that's great. Okay. So, Gabe, what's on the horizon for you, personally or professionally? What's going on with you? What have you been up to? Any big projects you're looking forward to over this year? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a whirlwind. I'm only a few months into my business, so
Yeah.
it's been nuts. But I'm really excited about the direction that we're headed in, and really working with. I've been starting to work with in a lot of the startup space. So I say early to growth stage companies, and really that kind of tracks along the first few years of a company and that
Yeah.
lifespan, right? And we at Illume, we're trying to really provide solutions to help companies um, at the stage that they're in move up to that next stage. So
Yeah.
early companies, really need help. It's a little bit more of a product market fit question, and more of how do we, a lot of founders are super brilliant, super smart in their field, but they're all about the technology. And
Yeah.
we're uh, no one really cares about the technology. I think it's really interesting, but you go tell an investor about the technology, they're like, cool. And so helping those early founders really, craft that story that's compelling and can resonate and get beyond um, that technology. And then even growth companies, really finding, I'm really big on finding, interesting and compelling insights into their
Mm-hmm.
customers to help them, position themselves, and the whole category of one thing gets thrown around a lot. It's not necessarily that you don't have competition. It's just that when they think about you, they think about you differently than
Yeah.
the competition. And I think that's really interesting to help, some of those growth stage companies through that, so that they can come up with more compelling story to sell their product and find out, and find ways to really differentiate themselves in the marketplace.
Yeah, dude, that's good. And I think a lot of people, a lot of founders, or people who have been in the career space for a long time, don't traditionally think about brand consulting services and agencies as being able to help with those things, right? But brand is the core element that moves businesses
Mhm.
forward. Brand is more than just the logos and the websites and the cool things that we visually put together. It's really the ethos of these companies and helping them tell that really clear story.
Yeah,
And I
it's it's
love,
the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole
yeah,
lot more under the ocean that you don't see.
yes, for
Yeah.
sure. And I love that is what you're helping these companies do. That's super incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, Gabe, dude, this has been a super awesome conversation, super fun. Thanks for putting up with Josh and I and our antics along the way. And we want to thank all of you for joining us on the Creative Belief podcast. We hope this conversation has been a reminder that you were made to create. We were all made to create, and we want you to continue to pursue those creative endeavors in whatever field you find yourself in. And if you enjoyed the show, we would love to have you do all the subscription things, right? Subscribe to the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, rate and review so that other people can find these super encouraging conversations. And then you can also follow along what our brand studio is up to. That's at Creator Studio on Instagram, and that's at CRTR Studio. Gabe, dude, thanks for being here. We super appreciate you and this conversation.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.